Welcome back, Sebastian here. So time for my review for the 2025 British Grand Prix. A very, very special race. Obviously a very, very special ending as well, with a first-time driver on the podium after a very, very long wait. So let's get this review started. So started the Grand Prix, of course. We had Max Verstappen on pole after a scintillating pole lap yesterday. Basically took it. Where McLaren's, the Ferraris made mistakes, not able to capitalize. So very, very good job well done by Verstappen yesterday. And the big question was, with that really skinny rear wing, would he be able to basically hold on in the Grand Prix? I think if this had been a dry race, maybe he could have held on to a top 2 spot. Maybe he could have won the Grand Prix, but it was a wet start. All drivers starting on wet tires for the formation lap. And a handful of drivers, Russell, Leclerc, Hadjar, Behrman, and Bortoleto, opted to switch to slick tires for the start. So we basically only had 14 cars on the grid. Colpinto as well, also unable to start the race because of some kind of gearbox issue. So a bit unfortunate for him. A bit like Hungary 2021, but of course not quite as dramatic. Good start by Verstappen, and Lawson was off at turn 3, so an incident very early on in the race. Lawson's not really entirely at fault. Basically a 3-1 going into turn 4, turn 5. And again, maybe he could have given a little bit more room on the outside, but it was kind of one of those ones where it's a racing incident where you have 3 cars going into a single spot and it doesn't really work. So unfortunately for Lawson, he was out on the opening lap of the Grand Prix, and that brought out the virtual safety car. Basically, Antonelli pits for slick tires with that virtual safety car comes out, and he actually comes out ahead of his teammate George Russell. And that kind of told you right away, maybe suggested right away that this strategy was maybe not the right one to be on. Lap 4, virtual safety car ends. We get back to racing, and right away, one of the drivers who had opted to start on the slick tires crashes out, and that is fellow rookie Gabriel Bortoleto. So he crashes out, I think turn 3, turn 4, relatively early on in the lap, just got the car on a wet patch, and again showed the risk of being on the slick tires at this point in time. He gets pretty significant rear wing damage. He's able to continue, but he's told by the team to pull over because they don't want to cause further debris. And as we've seen last year with the Canadian Grand Prix, where Perez and the Red Bull team got a pretty hefty penalty for basically asking the team to basically go back to the pits with a damaged car. There was a possibility that the same thing could happen to Bortoleto, which is likely why they asked him just to stay, basically just pull over and retire. Which with a rear wing failure, you're not going to be able to fix that in any short period of time. So makes a lot of sense there. So virtual safety car comes out again. A bit unusual that they had for both these instances that they opted for the VSC instead of the full safety car. My guess is that I think having such a big group of drivers basically do this crazy alternative strategy where they pitted for slick tires. If they brought the safety car in, it could have completely changed the dynamic of the race. So I think in some way or another, I think by not wanting to affect the dynamic of the race too much, by opting for a full safety car, they kind of inadvertently really kind of hurt those drivers who have pitted for slick tires on the formation lap. And that's kind of what ended up happening, where all 5 of those drivers, the strategy just didn't work out. And we'll get to that in a little bit. But rain was expected in 10 minutes. So there was a thought that perhaps drivers who had basically stayed on the intermediate tires, that they could perhaps basically just hold on until the next rain shower, and then they wouldn't need to change for slick tires at all. Virtual safety car ends. Stroll pits. This was actually a really well-inspired strategy. Pits for soft tires, had excellent pace on those tires, and used that to great effect a bit later on in the Grand Prix. So the Russell group, 30 seconds off the lead, and for whatever reason, Stroll, who of course had been in the first group, he basically pitting when he did for the soft tires for some reason worked very, very well, and he didn't really struggle the same way that they did. Lap 8, Russell, Piastri putting race leader Verstappen under pressure. Sector 3 still very, very wet. And so this was definitely causing some issues for Verstappen. But Piastri was able to overtake Verstappen into Stowe on lap 8 and to take the lead of the Grand Prix. Stroll moving up through the field on a soft tire, he is basically starting to overtake the drivers at the back of the field on the intermediates with relative ease at this point, doing a really good job with the strategy. Hulkenberg and Antonelli both pit at this point, and lap 11, I should say, rain starts raining again, and the Stroll train at this point. So all the drivers who had basically been on the slick tires, they were all forced to pit again for slicks. And one of the special aspects of the Silverstone track is because it's so high speed, tire wear is so high, is that this intermediate tires were being worn pretty heavily, especially since the track was kind of this odd mixture of Sector 3 being quite wet and Sectors 1 and 2 being quite dry. So Sectors 1 and 2, the intermediate tires were being ripped to shreds, and that meant that in all of this, they actually had to pit again when the rain shower hit, despite the fact there was only 10, 11 laps into the race. So Verstappen goes slightly off at Maggots. I think loses a position to Norris in this. Going off at Maggots and Beckett's. The Red Bull car looked like an absolute handful. It looked like a real disaster in the wet conditions. And all 3 leaders pit at this point. Verstappen gets back in front of Norris. Norris, of course, having to a bit of a delayed pit stop, being in front of being behind Piastri, and then of course being held up. But I think he also had a little bit of a slow stop, which also hurt him as well. Stroll, big winner in all of this. He is up to 4th place on the road from a 17th place starting position, so massive win for him. That initial strategy to pit for the softs and then to pit again for the intermediates. So really well job really well done by him, both keeping on the island in those tricky conditions, but also by the Aston Martin strategy team. Lap 13, Piastri is basically in complete control of this race. He has a 10-second lead at this point, which basically just miles up the road from everyone else. And this is where I think the FIA made decisions I think in the past they would not have. They basically, rain starts to fall quite heavily, and it is heavy rain, but the drivers are pretty well spaced out on track. This isn't the start of the race where the drivers are all bunched up really close together. Drivers are, pretty spread out through the field, and the FIA decided to bring out the safety car because they decided that it was too wet. They didn't want drivers to try to go on the wet tires, and basically a repeat of what we had in Brazil last year, which is basically the drivers just play Russian roulette and keep going until someone crashes. Really felt like the FIA didn't want any of that, which I'm not trying to advocate for danger, dangerous situations. But, that's really the way it's supposed to be. It's not this, it's raining, suddenly we have to bring, the safety car. That's really, goes against what F1's been for a long, long time, which is, you race when you race, and, when someone crashes, then that's when you bring the safety car out. And again, the wet tires do exist. So safety car comes out for quite a while. It was out for about 5 or 6 laps or so, and eventually does come in. On that restart, slight contact between, let's see, is this the, okay, yeah, so these were the wet conditions before. And before I move on to after the restart, lap 15, under the safety car, these were basically the big winners and losers from the initial first stint of the race. So Piastri, of course, up in the lead, Verstappen down a slot, and of course the big winners were, of course, Stroll in 4th, Hulkenberg 5th, who are basically up double digits in positions. Those were the big winners. Ocon also up really highly, as well as Gasly. Big losers, I would say definitely Russell in the Mercedes. That strategy did not work out. Alonso pitted too late, I think, for the second set of intermediates. But then you also have Leclerc down 8 spots, Antonelli down 4 spots, and Hadjar down 4 spots. Antonelli down 5, and then Hadjar down 4 spots as well. So you can see quite a mixed up grid at this point from where we started on lap 1. So safety car comes out. Safety car comes in, I should say. And again, track's still pretty wet at this point, but definitely, raceable conditions. And, like what I was saying before, when you have the safety car come in, the field basically bunches back up again. And with the really poor visibility that you had a much higher probability of incidents, and that's exactly what we had as Hadjar, who could barely see in front of him. So the top image is basically what Hadjar could see, and all he could see is basically the red rain lights, and it was very, very close to being in front of the car, which is where he saw them. Because before, you could see from the onboard shot, he couldn't even see the rain lights until he was just way too close and he couldn't react. He ends up going into the back of Antonelli. Antonelli continues on his way with significant car damage, unfortunately forced to retire with because of that. And Hadjar basically goes off, not a super heavy crash, but definitely ends up in the wall in Cop. So that is the second Racing Bulls car out of the race. And again, earlier in the lap, slight contact between Ocon and Russell at Cops, but again, both of them able to kind of come out unscathed. Behrman 13th, Antonelli 14th. And again, at this point, they were like the last two rookies, and then all the other rookies were out. So again, a bit like Australia, this was proving to be a race that was very, very tough for the rookie drivers. Again, that would be, as Antonelli would later retire, we'd end up with only one rookie finishing the race in Behrman. He had quite the eventful race today. So lap 22, that second safety car ends, and this is where we get the big controversial moment of the race. Safety car lights go off, and that means that the driver in the lead becomes the de facto safety car. And so Piastri brakes quite heavily. I think what they saw was around like 50. He breaks down to about 50 kilometers per hour, I believe is what I saw. And basically, Verstappen gets a little bit caught out by this with bit of a poor visibility, and he actually ends up overtaking Piastri under the safety car. Of course, gives the position back like he's supposed to. But yeah, quite frustrated coming over the radio saying he couldn't see him. Probably thinking in the back of the mind, is he doing what Russell was trying to do in Canada, trying to get me a penalty, try to get me more penalty points? But stewards basically take a look at this, and they decide that Piastri was driving erratically behind the safety car. Now, I think that the penalty itself was probably, on one hand, it was fair in the sense I think, it was a little bit erratic. The conditions were very bad. Visibility was quite poor. We just had Hadjar rear end Antonelli before, so that kind of heavy braking, again, probably FIA not being too happy about it. I saw in a comment section on one of the articles on the race, the website, they were talking about how someone had basically found the telemetry for the first safety car restart, and Piastri had basically braked almost the exact same way for that one as he had this one. That one, no penalty, of course. This one ended up with getting a penalty, and I really think it was the fact that Verstappen basically ends up going past him. Perhaps what ends up ensuing, moments later might have played a role in that. But I do think it's a pretty harsh penalty in the sense that the 10 seconds I think was probably a bit too harsh. I probably would have given it a 5-second penalty, and that could have completely changed the complexion of the race as well. So it's one of those tricky ones. I think, Piastri will learn from it. I'm not sure exactly what more. I think if the best way that he probably could have approached the situation is that he probably should have braked a little bit more gradually, basically brake gradually into stow, and then basically carried on his way. Because it's not like this is the final corner. He still had, quite a ways to go until club, which is where he would be able to go back to full speed. So again, I think it'll be a learning moment for Piastri. It'll be interesting to see how he reacts to this in the coming race. But at this point in the Grand Prix, Piastri has a 10-second penalty that he would have to serve. And this, of course, before what would happen in a couple moments' time, this would give the advantage to Verstappen and Norris. But a couple moments later, in a very uncharacteristic mistake, Max Verstappen basically ends up spinning on the exit of stow behind the safety car. Basically does kind of a half spin, but is able to rejoin the track. Of course, it's very slow speed, so it doesn't hit the barriers, but he loses a whole load of positions, ends up going all the way down to P10. And then, at this point, Antonelli boxes to retire, like I said, and this is where Piastri was under investigation. Hamilton goes off track at Copse. Russell gets past him up to 6th place, and this is where Piastri's penalty was announced. Then we got an incident as well, I think very, very close in time to this, between Tsunoda and Behrman. Tsunoda, a bit of a clumsy one, basically goes to spins Behrman round. Behrman basically takes a bit of a shortcut at Luffield. And basically rejoins the track. A little bit dangerous, but he kind of got away with it. And Tsunoda would end up getting a 10-second penalty. So not a great race for the Japanese driver, who is down. Let's see, at the restart he was down in 13th. So not great for him in a race that continues to get worse. Lap 30, Hamilton gets past Gasly. So at this point in proceedings, Gasly was basically a bit of a train, basically kind of protecting Hülkenberg and Stroll ahead, and Hamilton, Russell behind were quite a bit quicker in these conditions as the track was starting to dry out. But lap 30, Hamilton gets past Gasly for P5 at the Vale chicane. Lap 32, Hulkenberg starting to close in on Stroll. Lap 35, DRS is enabled, and Hulkenberg finally gets past Stroll for that P3 position. And this is where, the commentator's curse could have happened so many different times. They basically started putting up the graphics with, how many races Hulkenberg's done in his career, how many podiums he has had, which is, of course, 0 before this Grand Prix, spoiler alert. And, of course, all these different things that, in some other sports would definitely have been seen as like a commentator's curse type material. But again, Hulkenberg now up into a position that he's been in before. He has been in podium positions during Grand Prix before, but it was a real big test. Can he stay in this position on a drying track with the faster cars of Hamilton and Russell behind? Again, he does have a bit of a buffer there in Stroll, but again, I think with the faster front-running cars, Ferrari, Mercedes there, I think this was going to be a big ask. And I think at this point, it was kind of like yeah, probably not sure he's going to get a podium, but let's see how this goes. So, Hulkenberg gets past Stroll. Russell tries to move on Gasly, not able to get that done. Stroll down into 4th, 5th place as well. So, Hamilton is now the car in front of Hulkenberg. Lap 38, Alonso decides that he wants to be the first driver to try pitting for slicks, goes for the medium tires. They're not particularly fast, and I think this should have been a warning to a lot of other drivers not to do this. But George Russell deciding to be very bold with his strategy yet again today. He's in a points-paying position. He's in 7th place, and he decides that he wants to gamble for slick tires too. So Russell's second gamble of the day. First one didn't work out, but surely, like any good gambler mindset, the second one is definitely going to work out. And unfortunately for Russell, that was not the case. So he pits for lap 39 for, I believe, hard tires. Those are the only new set that I believe he had. And following laps 40, he spins right away down Meggett's and Beckett's. Luckily, he doesn't hit the barrier, but he's able to continue. And yeah, not a particularly good strategy decision there by Mr. George Russell. And benefiting from drivers deciding to pit out of the points-paying position, Max Verstappen, also a couple good overtakes here and there. He is up into 6th place, gets past Gasly as well at turn 4. Lap 42, Hamilton pits for soft tires. And this is, I think, probably for me, this was kind of the big moment where it would be really interesting to see what happened with Hulkenberg. Sauber could have been very, very conservative, waited a bit too long to pit for the crossover point. Hamilton could have easily undercut Hulkenberg, because at this point the gap was like 5, 6, 7 seconds, which in these conditions can be wiped out very, very quickly. But for Hamilton, very, very scrappy outlap. A couple mistakes, a couple instances here and there where he, would kind of go wide. I think he missed turn 3 as well at one point. So that basically took a lot of the pressure off of Hulkenberg. Stroll, Verstappen also pit. That was pretty close to the perfect lap. And then 43, Hulkenberg, Leclerc, and Albon all pit. And that was honestly the best lap to pit, I think, was lap 43. Behrman, he, again, his dramas continue. He hits his teammate. He takes a page out of Ocon's book, and he basically goes into the side of his teammate at Luffield, I believe, or the corner right before Luffield, the left-hander. They basically do a synchronized pirouette, and they basically continue on their way. And I believe the FIA did not penalize that, as they traditionally don't penalize incidents between teammates. So yeah, not a great Grand Prix for Behrman, a very eventful weekend, but mostly for not the right reasons. But at this point, closing laps, Norris pits as well. They stayed out, but they had such a massive advantage. I think they were like 30-40 seconds in the lead. At this point, they had a massive advantage over Hulkenberg. Norris leads. Piastri finally pits, serves his penalty. He comes out about 5 or 6 seconds behind Norris, which showed that without that penalty, if the penalty had been 5 seconds, you could have had a very, very different story in the closing laps of the race. Piastri has a bit of a moment at Beckett's, but able to continue, able to avoid further drama. Lap 46, Leclerc goes to the gravel as well, and that was not a great moment there by Leclerc. He had a pretty horrific Grand Prix. And in the final laps at this point, you have about 5-6 laps left in the race. It was really down to what was going to happen between Hulkenberg and Hamilton for the final spot on the podium. The gap was basically hovering between 6 seconds, 7 seconds. It wasn't really coming down, or if it was like 0.2 of a second a lap. And at this point, you could really feel the tension, both in the Sauber team, the commentators as well, and definitely myself. I was basically didn't even take notes at this point. I was just staring at my screen, staring at the gap between Hulkenberg and Hamilton, just making, really hoping that, Hulkenberg can finally get his maiden podium, because it would be, such an amazing, great story. So that was really the story in the closing laps of the race. Again, I think this was just kind of talking about, what happened after the final pit stops, and you can see, quite a bit of change there, with Leclerc basically having a horrific race down in 14th. And at this point, Hulkenberg Hamilton was that final battle with Verstappen really angry on the radio, complaining about how terrible his car was. So that was the final laps. And of course, you had the other big storyline, which was Norris potentially winning his home Grand Prix for the first time ever. And that is what ended up happening. Norris takes the checkered flag, wins his home Grand Prix. Big cheers from the Lando Norris grandstand. And about 40 seconds later, Hulkenberg finally takes the checkered flag as well, gets his maiden podium in F1. Absolutely amazing story, amazing scenes from the Sauber garage. And it's moments like that makes you love F1, makes you love Grand Prix racing, where you have that giant killer story with Hulkenberg finally being on the podium, 15, 16 years after his F1 debut. So, your final result for the 2025 British Grand Prix: McLaren 1-2 Norris ahead of Piastri. That tightens things up in the Drivers' Championship a bit. We'll get there in a sec. And then third, of course, the driver of the day by an absolutely whopping percentage, and driver who had an absolutely amazing race, is Nico Hulkenberg, driving a Sauber. Fourth, Hamilton. Fifth, Verstappen. Sixth, Gasly. Seventh, Stroll. Eighth, Albon. Good pass by Gasly, getting past Stroll on the final lap. Ninth, Alonso. And 10th, 1 point for him with his bold strategy decisions. Not a great drive for the Mercedes man. 11th, Behrman, despite all of his incidents, still ends up 11th. Showed he had a lot of speed this weekend. And I think without those incidents, could have easily gotten a very, very high point-paying position. Could easily end up where Gasly, Stroll were, I think, with a clean weekend. But that's a conversation for my power rankings tomorrow. Sainz 12th, bit of a quiet weekend, was in the points for quite a bit, just didn't seem to have the pace in the closing stages. Ocon 13th, Leclerc 14th, and Yuki Tsunoda, driving the other Red Bull, dead last in a lap down for the second straight weekend. So not a great doubleheader this one has been for Tsunoda. Your 5 DNFs, or I guess 4 DNFs and 1 DNS, are Antonelli, Hadjar, Bortoleto, Lawson, and Colapinto, all rookies. So taking a look at your Drivers' Championship, Piastri doesn't extend his lead. His lead gets slimmed down, 234 for him, 226 for Norris. Verstappen gained surprisingly on his main rivals, Russell and Leclerc, for third in the championship. Of course, lost a bit to Hamilton. Seventh, Antonelli, kind of in no man's land. Albon still in 8th, but Hulkenberg moves up to 9th, I believe, 37 points in the Sauber. Quite a big surprise. I think that's their highest points haul in a single season for a driver since Bottas, so actually not that long ago. But again, we're still halfway through the season. I think if Hulkenberg can keep this pace up, could be on for quite a big haul of points by the end of the season. 10th, Ocon on 23, 11th, Hadjar, 12th, Stroll, 13th, Gasly, 14th, Alonso. Stroll, whenever Alonso is just seeming to catch him in the Drivers' Championship, Stroll gets a random Senna weekend out of the bag and gets a big load of points in the wet conditions. 5th, Sainz, 6th, Lawson, 16th, Lawson, 17th, Tsunoda, 18th, Behrman, 19th, Bortoleto, 21st, that should be 20th, Colapinto, and 21st doing, my bad there. In terms of the Constructors' Championship, McLaren extend their lead 460 points. They're pretty much guaranteed to be Constructors' Champions for the second straight season. Ferrari in second, 222, followed by Mercedes on 210. Red Bull, a little bit adrift. Realistically, when you have a one-car team, only one car scoring points, it's really hard to compete in a Constructors' Championship, so they're going to be a bit adrift in 4th, 172. 5th place, Williams. I think they're going to have to start looking over their shoulder now at Sauber and a couple of these other teams. They're on 59, Sauber on 6, big jump forward today on 41, followed by Racing Bulls and Aston tied for 36, followed by Haas in 9th with 29, and then Alpine, a nice haul of points today, is up in 19th. So really, really competitive. Bottom of the championship, probably the most competitive it's been in F1 history. But there you go. That is the halfway mark point of the season. The 2025 British Grand Prix is in the books, and another great British Grand Prix, another wet, dry race, a bit like what we had last year. So thank you so much for watching. That is my review, and I'll be back tomorrow with my power rankings. So thank you so much for watching, and goodbye.